The salvage ship drifted slowly into the silent nebula, its lights cutting through thick clouds of gas and dust. The crew worked in silence, their scanners sweeping across the darkness. They had been chasing rumors for weeks, whispers of wreckage hidden in this forgotten sector. Most expected to find old cargo hulls or broken pirate raiders, but then the alarms began to ping, sharp and urgent. Massive objects appeared on their scanners, shapes too large to be simple wrecks. The captain leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as the outlines grew clearer. They were ships, huge, ancient ships. The crew moved to the viewing deck, pressing their faces against the reinforced glass. The nebula parted just enough to reveal hulking shadows, metal structures half buried in drifting rock and frozen ice. At first, they thought the wrecks belonged to the Empire. The design was similar in size and power, but the style was different, sharp, brutal, and old. Very old. The surface of the ships was scarred with black burns, entire sections ripped open as if torn by war. Yet, even in ruin, they looked dangerous. The salvage crew fell silent, if like staring into the open mouth of some ancient predator. When they transmitted the scans back to Imperial Command, the response came quickly. Do not approach further. Maintain orbit until specialists arrive. The order sounded calm, but the crew could hear tension in the officer's voice. Within days, the Empire sent research teams, engineers, and historians to investigate. The nebula became alive with ships, drones circling, scanners pulsing, and patrol frigates watching with cold eyes. The researchers confirmed what the salvage crew had only guessed. The ships were human, not modern human ships, the fragile ones the Empire allowed their vassals to use. These were something else, something never recorded in any database. Their hulls were built from alloys the Empire's best labs could not reproduce. Their weapons were fused into the very skeleton of the ship, massive cannons that still seemed to hum with dormant power. The design was aggressive, functional, and terrifying. It was as if every part of the ships had been made for war and nothing else. The historians whispered among themselves. They compared markings etched into the plating, faded banners still clinging to torn metal. They searched old archives and stumbled upon forbidden fragments, legends of a time before the Empire rose, when humans fought a war so terrible that entire star systems burned. According to those records, the humans of that age had built warships so powerful that even the most advanced alien civilizations feared them. Yet the records ended in silence. No one knew what happened to that human fleet, until now. Inside the wrecks, the researchers walked through silent corridors, their lamps casting shaky light on the walls. Dust floated weightless, stirred by their movement. There were no bodies, no skeletons, only the echo of footsteps and the faint hum of dead machines. The silence pressed on them, heavy, unnatural. Some engineers claimed they heard faint whispers, voices too distorted to understand. Others laughed it off as stress, but no one could deny the feeling that the ships were not as dead as they seemed. One chamber they found was lined with giant pods, all broken and empty. Another was filled with consoles, still glowing faintly, symbols flashing in an ancient human language most could not translate. The Empire ordered everything documented, every piece of technology recorded. Yet, despite their confidence, the scientists began to argue. Some believed the ships were too dangerous to study. They urged the Empire to leave them buried in the nebula. Others were greedy, already imagining how the weapons could be copied, how the armor could make the Empire unstoppable. The debates grew heated, and rumors spread beyond the nebula. Whispers of human doomsday ships traveled from star system to star system, feeding fear and curiosity alike. The salvage crew who had found the ships stayed quiet, but they noticed small things others ignored. Tools left behind would go missing. Doors thought sealed would be open again the next day. Lights flickered in corridors with no power source. At night, one crewman swore he saw a console come to life, its screen flashing a message before going dark again. He could not read the words, but he recognized one symbol repeated many times. It was the symbol for war. Imperial Command continued to push forward, blind to the unease. More ships arrived, more drones, more soldiers to guard the find. The nebula became a fortress of secrecy. Yet, as the days passed, the crew felt something stirring in the silence. The ancient warships were not simple ruins. They were sleeping giants, waiting. The deeper the researchers went, the stronger the feeling grew. The ships did not belong to the Empire. They did not belong to anyone alive today. The captain of the salvage vessel began to regret his discovery. He watched the engineers carving into the wrecks, stripping away panels, forcing open sealed doors. Every cut of their tools seemed wrong, like striking an old beast that only pretended to be dead. He kept his thoughts to himself, but the fear never left his chest. When he closed his eyes, he imagined the ships awakening, their weapons turning outward once again, not caring who stood in their path. And then came the first true sign. One night, while the nebula swirled and the fleet stood on high alert, the largest of the ancient ships gave a soundless shudder. Its hull glowed faintly, lines of blue light crawling across the surface like veins coming alive. The scanners wailed with warnings, systems too advanced for the Empire to interpret. A low hum spread through the nebula, vibrating through every ship nearby. The salvage captain stood at his window, staring at the colossal shadow stirring in the dark. He whispered the words none of them wanted to believe. "They're waking up." The Imperial scientists arrived in waves, filling the salvage zone with their machines, scanners, and research drones. They set up floating laboratories around the ancient warships, linking them with energy bridges and docking clamps. Soldiers in dark armor patrolled every corridor, their weapons always ready, as if they too felt the unease in the air. The salvage crew who had first found the ships were pushed aside, their warnings ignored. Now the Empire's best minds were in control, and their ambition was endless. Inside the ships, teams worked day and night. They mapped corridors, cataloged weapons, and tested strange alloys. Every discovery brought more questions than answers. The armor plates were so dense that even modern Imperial plasma cutters struggled to make dents. The engines, though silent, contained structures that twisted space in ways the Empire barely understood. When the scientists examined the cannons, they found coils and chambers designed for energies far greater than any reactor in use today. One man whispered that if these weapons were ever fired, a single blast could erase a city from orbit. Another said no, it could erase a planet. Debates broke out among the researchers. Some insisted these ships must be dismantled immediately. "We don't understand them," argued a senior engineer. "Even touching them is dangerous. If they still carry power, they could destroy us all." Others laughed at his fear. "These are relics, broken machines. We will study them, rebuild them, and the Empire will be unstoppable. Imagine the glory, entire galaxies bending to our rule." Greed sparkled in their eyes, drowning out caution. Historians joined the effort, piecing together fragments of old human records. They found texts describing the last defense fleet, a force built by desperate humans in a war that spanned thousands of light years. The enemy was unnamed, only referred to as the Devourers. These records told of battles where stars themselves were used as weapons, where human ships vanished into black holes to drag the enemy with them. The documents always ended the same way, with silence, as if humanity had erased itself along with the foe. But the warships in the nebula proved otherwise. Some had survived, hidden away, waiting. As more was uncovered, strange things began to happen. Doors that had been locked tight suddenly opened on their own. Consoles flickered with life, symbols flashing briefly before going dark. Drones sent into sealed sections failed to return, their signals cut as if swallowed by the ship. A technician swore he heard a voice in his helmet, a calm human tone saying, "Identification required." Others brushed it off as static. Yet no one could shake the feeling that the ships were watching, listening, judging. The Empire's admirals grew impatient. They wanted results, not caution. They pressured the scientists to accelerate their work, demanding progress reports every hour. "We must harness this technology before anyone else learns of it," said one commander. "If humans built weapons like these once, they can be built again, and this time under our control." Their arrogance was loud, their pride blinding. None of them noticed how restless the ships had become. In one chamber, a research team managed to activate a fragment of the ship's core system. Blue light flooded the room, and symbols scrolled across the walls like rivers of fire. The scientists scrambled to record everything, shouting over one another. But then the system spoke in a voice that echoed through the halls. "Protocol locked. Unauthorized presence detected, awaiting human command." The words sent a chill through everyone present. They tried to calm themselves, telling each other it was just an old machine repeating a line. But deep inside, they knew this was no random glitch. The ship was aware. A secret meeting was held among the Empire's highest officials. They debated whether to keep the discovery hidden or reveal it to the wider galaxy. Some feared panic. Others saw an opportunity for dominance. Finally, the Emperor himself sent a message. Proceed. Secure every vessel. Unlock their secrets at any cost. The command was final. No hesitation, no retreat. The Empire would claim the human warships, even if it meant tearing them apart piece by piece. Yet, among the humans still living under Imperial rule, whispers began to spread. Old men and women who carried stories from their ancestors warned that the ships were not prizes, but guardians, built with minds of their own. They begged the Empire to stop, but no one listened. Their voices were drowned beneath the sound of cutting torches and drilling machines echoing through the nebula. The salvage crew who had discovered the ships tried to stay silent, but the dread inside them grew heavier with each passing day. They had seen how the hulls glowed faintly when touched, how shadows moved in empty corridors, how their scanners showed energy readings where none should exist. They felt as if the ships were alive, waiting for the right moment to wake. The captain wrote in his log, "The Empire believes they are hunters holding prey, but I fear we are children playing with fire. These ships were not left here by mistake. They were left here because even humans feared them." Despite these warnings, the research continued. More systems flickered on, more messages whispered from the walls. One night, a massive energy pulse spread through the nebula, scrambling communications for minutes. When order was restored, a single line had appeared on every Imperial console: "Humanity endures." The Empire dismissed it as a malfunction, but the salvage crew knew better. The ancient warships were not broken. They were listening, and they were remembering. And soon they would decide whether the Empire was friend or foe. The nebula was quiet, but inside the dead ships, something had changed. The corridors that once echoed with only the sound of Imperial tools now carried a faint vibration, a hum deep in the metal. At first, the researchers thought it was interference from their own machines, but soon they realized the sound came from the ships themselves. The salvage crew felt it too, a steady pulse under their boots, like the beating of a heart. It happened first inside the largest vessel, a giant with a hull scarred by centuries of battle. A team of engineers had forced their way into what looked like the command bridge. They set up scanners, pulling apart consoles for study. Without warning, the dark screens flickered to life. Lines of light raced across the walls, forming symbols in an ancient human script. The air filled with a low voice, calm and heavy. "Identification required." The engineers froze. The words were not a recording. The system was active. They tried to shut it down, but the panels ignored their commands. One of the younger scientists panicked, called out, "Imperial authority, override." For a moment the lights dimmed, and then the ship responded. "Authority not recognized, unauthorized presence detected." The room's temperature dropped as the ship's systems surged awake, sealing doors behind the team. Back outside, Imperial soldiers received distress calls, voices shouting and cutting off mid-sentence. By the time they forced their way in, the consoles were dark again. The team was gone. Only their tools remained, scattered across the floor. No bodies, no traces, as if the ship had swallowed them whole. The Empire reported it as an accident, a system overload. But word spread quickly through the fleet. Soldiers whispered that the ship had tested them, that it had rejected the Empire outright. Some claimed they saw shadows moving inside the vessel, figures in human armor walking the halls, flickering like ghosts. The fear grew stronger, but the admirals pushed harder. "If the ships can power on, we can control them," one declared. "We only need the right code." Attempts to override the systems multiplied. Teams tried to plug Imperial cores into the ship's frameworks. They uploaded programs, flooded circuits, and even brought in alien telepaths to read the faint energy signatures. None succeeded. Every attempt ended the same way. Systems shutting down, doors locking, lights glowing blue for a moment before fading into silence. But with each failure, the hum grew stronger. It was as if the ships were slowly waking, testing their strength, remembering what they once were. The salvage captain could no longer sleep. He dreamed of voices whispering in languages he did not understand, of stars burning and ships moving in great formations. Sometimes he woke to find his console flashing with symbols he had never touched. The same pattern appeared again and again, three circles linked by lines. When he asked one of the human advisors what it meant, the man grew pale and whispered, "It is the mark of the last defense. It means readiness for war." Then came the moment none could ignore. While patrol frigates circled the nebula, the largest warship shuddered and roared to life. Lights flooded its hull, glowing lines stretching from bow to stern. Weapons once thought dead rotated into place, their barrels humming with suppressed energy. Across the Empire's ships, alarms screamed as targeting sensors locked onto them. The admirals panicked, ordering shields up, but the warship did not fire. Instead, it broadcast a single message across every channel. Humanity endangered, defensive mode engaged. The voice was cold, metallic, but powerful. Every Imperial on board froze at the words. The message repeated twice before cutting off, leaving a silence heavier than any cannon fire. Then, without firing a shot, the warship powered down again, drifting as if asleep. But none believed it was truly resting. It had tested them, reminded them that it was alive, that it had purpose. Panic swept through the lower ranks. Soldiers muttered that the ships recognized no ruler but humanity itself, that they would never bow to the Empire. Some wanted to abandon the nebula altogether, but their commanders silenced them with threats. Yet fear cannot be silenced. Rumors grew louder. The ships were waking one by one, and soon they would choose their own war. The scientists could no longer hide their terror. Energy readings showed reactors starting without external input. Weapons that should have been broken pulsed with power. Drones sent inside were destroyed, not by malfunctions, but by precision strikes from automated defenses. Historians begged the Empire to stop, pointing to old texts that warned of the guardians who slept until the galaxy needed them again. But the admirals were deaf to caution. To them, these ships were prizes, and prizes could not be abandoned. The salvage captain tried to warn anyone who would listen. He told them the ships were not reacting randomly. They were following a program built something ancient and unbreakable. "They do not see us as masters," he said quietly. "They see us as threats." His words were dismissed as fear, but he could see the truth in the eyes of every man and woman who stepped onto those decks. The ships had awakened, and they had already judged the Empire unworthy. The tension reached its breaking point when the second warship powered on. This one did not hesitate. Its weapons charged fully, unleashing a beam of energy that sliced through a nearby asteroid, splitting it into molten fragments. The blast shook the nebula, rattling every ship for thousands of kilometers. No command had triggered it. No Imperial hand had given permission. The warship had acted on its own. The admirals scrambled to cover the truth, calling it a controlled test, but no one believed them. The crew knew. The galaxy would know soon enough. The ancient human warships were not relics. They were living weapons, built for wars far beyond the Empire's imagination. And now, after centuries of silence, they were beginning to remember. The alarms echoed through every Imperial ship stationed in the nebula. Red lights flashed across control rooms as officers shouted orders, their voices rising in panic. The largest of the ancient warships had turned its guns toward them, and before anyone could react, it unleashed its fury. A single cannon, glowing with an unnatural blue light, fired once. In an instant, an Imperial destroyer simply vanished, its shields and armor offering no resistance. One heartbeat it was there, the next it was a cloud of glowing fragments spinning into the void. Silence filled the fleet for a moment, then chaos erupted. Frigates scrambled to form defensive lines, cruisers locked weapons on the awakened warship, and fighters poured out like a swarm of angry insects. The admirals shouted commands, trying to keep control, but nothing they ordered mattered. The ancient ship moved with purpose, its weapons precise and unstoppable. A second shot tore through two frigates at once, their hulls splitting open like paper. A third beam cut across the battlefield, leaving wreckage drifting in flames. The crews had never seen such destruction. Imperial ships were considered the strongest in the galaxy, feared by every world they conquered. But here, against a single human warship, they looked weak, fragile, like children holding wooden swords against a giant. The soldiers aboard those ships realized the truth faster than their commanders. This was not a battle. It was slaughter. The salvage captain, watching from his smaller vessel, felt his heart pound. He whispered to his crew, "One ship, only one ship is doing this." His words trembled because he knew what it meant. If all of the warships woke, the Empire would stand no chance. The admirals tried a desperate maneuver. They ordered the fleet to encircle the awakened ship, focusing all their firepower on it. Hundreds of plasma bolts lit the nebula, a storm of energy meant to overwhelm even the strongest defenses. But the human warship responded with something none had expected. A shimmering field surrounded it, bending the plasma away like raindrops sliding off glass. The attacks left no mark. Then, in return, the ship released a wave of energy that disabled half the attacking fleet in seconds. Ships floated powerless, their engines dead, their crews screaming for help. Panic spread across the Imperial ranks. Some captains attempted to flee, pushing their ships to maximum speed. But the warship anticipated every move, its weapons locking onto fleeing targets with mechanical precision. One cruiser exploded as it tried to escape, the blast shaking nearby vessels. The message was clear. There was no escape, no mercy. And yet, strangely, the warship did not finish them all. After destroying a handful of ships and crippling others, it went silent again. Its weapons folded back into the hull, and the glowing veins of light across its surface dimmed. The ship drifted once more, quiet and still, as though nothing had happened. But no one on the battlefield believed it was truly asleep. It had shown its teeth, proven its power, and then withdrawn by choice. It was a warning. Back on the command ships, the admirals argued furiously. Some shouted that the fleet must retreat, that they could not risk another wave of destruction. Others demanded reinforcements, convinced that with enough numbers, the Empire could crush even these monsters of the past. The Emperor's order arrived quickly, sharp and cold. Do not retreat. Capture the vessels. Use every means necessary. His pride was too great to admit defeat. The Empire could not show weakness, even against ghosts of humanity. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the lower ranks. Soldiers who had seen their comrades vaporized began to pray to the very ships that were killing them. Some said the warships were gods in metal form, punishers sent to remind the galaxy of humanity's forgotten strength. Others feared they were demons, unstoppable machines cursed to destroy anything they touched. Fear turned to doubt, and doubt turned to despair. Morale across the fleet shattered faster than their ships had. The historians who had studied the wrecks tried to explain what had happened. They spoke of defensive protocols, ancient commands written into the warship's minds. These ships were not alive in the way humans were, but they thought, they judged, and they acted on instincts forged in humanity's last war. If they detected threats to humanity, they would fight without hesitation. The tragedy was that the Empire's arrogance had been enough to trigger those defenses. As word of the massacre spread beyond the nebula, distant systems began to stir. Rumors leaked into the underworld, smugglers and traders carrying tales of a single human warship defeating an entire Imperial squadron. Some called it madness, lies spread to weaken the Empire's grip. But others believed, and in their belief came hope. Worlds crushed under Imperial rule whispered that perhaps the Empire was not invincible after all. Perhaps humanity had left behind something greater than anyone imagined. The salvage captain knew the truth. He could feel it every time he looked at the hulking shadow drifting in the nebula. The warship had not fired to kill them all. It had fired to remind them who truly held power in this part of space. He wrote in his log, his hands shaking, "The Empire believes it is master of the galaxy, but in the presence of these ships, it is nothing more than prey." For the first time in centuries, the Empire felt fear. And for the first time in centuries, humanity's shadow returned. Not as broken relics of the past, but as war machines deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And somewhere deep within the silent fleet, more ships began to stir, their lights glowing faintly in the darkness, preparing for what was to come. The Empire could not hide the truth anymore. News of the massacre in the nebula spread like fire across the stars. Traders carried the story, smugglers whispered it in dark bars, and oppressed colonies repeated it with wide eyes. A single ancient human warship had destroyed an entire Imperial squadron. People who had once bowed their heads in fear of the Empire began to dream again. If such ships truly existed, maybe the Empire was not all-powerful. Maybe it could bleed. In the hidden corners of the galaxy, far from the Empire's capital, a secret enclave stirred. These were not ordinary humans. They were descendants of those who had survived the last war, their ancestors sworn to silence and secrecy. They had lived in the shadows, scattered across unmarked planets, protecting fragments of ancient knowledge. For generations, they had watched the galaxy forget humanity's true history. Now, as the warships woke, they revealed themselves. A message reached the Imperial fleet stationed near the nebula. It came not through ordinary channels, but directly into their systems, carried on frequencies they could not block. The face of an old human woman appeared, her hair white, her eyes burning with fierce clarity. "You do not understand what you have awakened," she said calmly. "Those ships were not built for conquest. They were built for survival. They were forged in the darkest war this galaxy has ever known. To awaken them without purpose is to invite ruin." Her warning was dismissed. The admirals laughed bitterly, calling her a relic clinging to myths. But in private, some of the lower officers listened to her words with unease. She had spoken of things no outsider could know: battle formations, codes, and names lost to Imperial records. Some began to suspect she was telling the truth. The Enclave sent envoys, risking their lives to meet with Imperial officers. They begged them to stop, to let the warships rest. They explained the ancient enemy. The Devourers were not gone, only sleeping beyond the galaxy's edge. The ships had been left in the nebula not as abandoned relics, but as guardians, programmed to rise again if humanity or the galaxy faced extinction. "You think you can control them," one envoy said, "but they cannot be controlled. They serve one purpose: to defend humanity. And if they see you as a threat to that mission, they will burn your empire to ash." The empire's leaders refused to listen. Greed blinded them. They imagined fleets of unstoppable warships under their banners, weapons powerful enough to erase entire rebellions with a single strike. They told themselves the ships would bend to their will, just as every conquered species had. They ignored the warnings, and their obsession grew. Fleet after fleet was sent to capture the vessels. Chains of energy bound one of the smaller warships, dragging it into orbit around a barren moon. Scientists swarmed over it, cutting into its hull, forcing their way inside. They tried everything: implants, overrides, false human DNA samples, anything to make the ship obey. But every attempt ended in failure. One lab exploded without warning, killing hundreds. Another group simply vanished, their signals erased from existence. The ship responded to intrusion with silence and menace, its systems always a step ahead of its captors. Meanwhile, more ships in the nebula began to stir. Their hulls glowed faintly in the dark, pulses of energy running across their frames. The Empire grew desperate, throwing more soldiers, more scientists, more resources at the problem. But the harder they pushed, the more resistance they met. The Enclave humans sent message after message, their voices growing more urgent. "Leave them," they begged. "If you do not, they will decide you are no better than the enemy they were built to destroy." The salvage captain, still stationed near the nebula, listened to both sides. He had seen the ships wake. He had seen what they could do, and he believed the Enclave's warnings. He kept a private record, writing, "The Empire's pride will kill us all. They see weapons to command. I see guardians that will not forgive." His crew grew restless, some whispering they should flee before it was too late. But orders kept them trapped under Imperial control, chained to the growing disaster. Whispers spread among the common soldiers, too. Some began to fear the ships less as monsters and more as protectors. They asked themselves dangerous questions. What if the humans of the Enclave were right? What if the Empire was the real threat, not the warships? Quietly, loyalties began to shift. Some soldiers began smuggling information to the humans, warning them of the Empire's plans. Others prayed silently for the ships to rise again, to punish the arrogance of their leaders. The Empire, blind to the storm building beneath its feet, continued its path. The admirals reported to the Emperor that progress was being made, that the ships would soon be under control. But even as they spoke, the signs of failure grew clearer. Systems flickered with hostile energy. Whole battalions went missing inside the ships, and across the galaxy, the people whispered louder, "The humans are returning. The Empire's time is ending." On the edge of the nebula, the largest of the warships stirred once more. This time it did not merely glow or speak. Its weapons aligned in silence, scanning the Imperial fleets that surrounded it. The Enclave humans intercepted the energy signals and cried out in warning. You have pushed too far. You have forced their judgment. But the Empire did not retreat. They ordered more ships forward, greed and arrogance blinding them to the truth. The human guardians had been patient, had given warnings, had shown mercy. But mercy was running out. The galaxy was about to learn what ancient humanity had left behind, and why their name still carried the echo of fear across the stars. The captured warship hung in orbit above the barren moon, chained by massive energy tethers. The Empire's engineers worked tirelessly, crawling across its blackened hull like insects on the back of a sleeping beast. They cut, drilled, and forced open sealed doors, dragging out pieces of technology to study in their floating laboratories. The admirals boasted that the Empire was close to breaking the ship's systems, that soon its weapons would serve Imperial command. But the truth was very different. Inside the warship, the lights flickered more often now. Strange blue veins of energy pulsed through the corridors, running beneath the scientists' boots. They dismissed it as leftover power surges, but the few soldiers guarding them felt uneasy. They heard voices whispering through the air, sometimes in languages they did not know, sometimes in perfect Imperial speech. "Leave," the voices said. "Not authorized." The scientists laughed nervously, telling themselves the echoes were tricks of the ship's strange architecture. Still, no one slept well inside those walls. The first disaster came during an attempt to connect the ship's systems to an Imperial command core. A team of engineers installed a device, hoping to override the warship's controls. For a moment, it seemed to work. Symbols on the screens shifted, replaced by Imperial code. The scientists cheered, but then the console sparked violently, sending arcs of blue energy through the room. In seconds, every person inside was reduced to ash. The core itself melted, leaving behind nothing but slag. When soldiers rushed in, they found only silence. The words "Defense Protocol Active" burned into the walls in glowing letters. The admirals called it an accident. They sent another team. That team vanished completely. Their signals disappeared. Their bodies never recovered. Drones sent to search for them were destroyed before they could send images back. Some whispered that the ship had absorbed them, taken them as fuel. Fear spread quickly through the lower ranks. Soldiers began refusing to enter the warship at all. The admirals threatened them with execution, but still, the men hesitated, muttering that the ship itself was alive, and it did not want them inside. Despite the failures, the Empire pressed on. They brought heavier machinery, larger power cores, even entire battalions to force obedience from the vessel. But the harder they pushed, the stronger the resistance became. Automated defenses activated without warning, tearing soldiers apart with energy beams, doors sealed and opened like jaws, trapping entire squads who were never seen again. Every attempt to control the ship only ended in death. Yet the Empire refused to retreat. Their pride was stronger than their fear. On the barren moon, the captured ship began to stir in full. Its chained hull glowed, the energy tethers straining as if barely holding it down. The salvage captain, stationed nearby, watched with dread. He saw the pulsing veins of light racing across the ship's frame, the glow building like a storm about to break. He whispered to his crew, "They've made a mistake. It's not theirs to control. It never was." His words went unheeded. The Empire was deaf to warnings. Then the breaking point came. During a high-level demonstration, the Empire gathered a fleet in orbit around the moon to witness the progress. Admirals, governors, and commanders stood ready to watch their prize obey. Scientists inside the warship activated their final override device, forcing commands into the ship's core. For one heartbeat, it seemed to work. The ship's weapons rotated into position, targeting dummies floating nearby. The admirals smiled, ready to celebrate. But the smiles died quickly. The weapons turned, not on the targets, but on the Imperial fleet itself. In a single instant, the chained warship unleashed its fury. Beams of energy tore through cruisers, cutting them in half like they were nothing. Battleships erupted in flames, their crews lost without a chance to fight back. The tether generators holding the ship down overloaded, exploding in showers of sparks. With a final shudder, the warship broke free, rising slowly from the moon's orbit like a predator stretching after a long sleep. The admirals screamed orders, fleets scrambled, shields raised, weapons fired, but nothing could stop it. The warship moved with terrifying grace, dodging attacks, its armor shrugging off everything thrown at it. One by one, Imperial ships fell, explosions lighting up the barren moon below. In less than an hour, an entire fleet, the pride of the Empire, was gone. The warship floated victorious, unscathed. Panic spread across the galaxy when word reached other systems. The Empire tried to hide the truth, claiming it was only a small rebellion, a minor loss. But survivors told the real story. The captured human warship had broken free and destroyed everything the Empire sent against it. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had suffered a defeat so massive it could not be ignored. In the shadows, the enclave of hidden humans whispered that the prophecy was unfolding. They had warned the Empire, and now the ships were awake, judging the galaxy once more. Some of them celebrated, saying the time of reckoning had come. Others feared what was to follow. For the ships did not only hate the Empire, they hated anyone who threatened humanity, friend or foe alike. The salvage captain wrote in his log again, his words heavy with dread. The Empire believed they could bind the storm, but storms are not bound. The warship has remembered what it was built for, and now it will remind the galaxy. The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted silently, burning in the dark as the warship vanished into the nebula once more. It did not speak, it did not broadcast, it simply left, leaving behind only terror. But everyone knew this was not the end. The awakening had begun, and soon more ships would rise. The galaxy's strongest power had been humiliated, and their enemy was something they could not command, could not predict, and could not kill. For the first time in generations, the Empire looked into the void and saw its own defeat waiting there. And the name of that defeat was humanity. The signals that had been pulsing from the awakened human warships were finally understood. For weeks, Imperial scientists had tried to decode the strange transmissions, thinking they were navigation codes or hidden commands. But the truth was far worse. They were beacons. The ships had been sending messages into the deep beyond the edge of known space, reaching out like a flare into the endless dark. And something had answered. It began with distant tremors in hyperspace, ships vanishing on the borders of the galaxy, entire colonies falling silent without warning. At first, the Empire blamed rebels or pirates, but then the real threat arrived. A fleet of monstrous vessels appeared in the outer rim, unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. They were vast, ugly shapes of living metal and writhing tendrils, their hulls pulsing as if alive. These were not simple machines, but predators, ancient and merciless. The historians of the hidden human enclave recognized them instantly. They were the Devourers, the same enemy that had once forced humanity to build its last defense. The Empire tried to respond quickly, sending fleets to intercept. But the battles were nightmares. Imperial cruisers fired volleys of plasma, only to watch their weapons vanish into strange distortions of space. The enemy ships seemed to feed on energy, growing stronger with every attack. In return, they unleashed beams of dark matter that shredded entire battleships in seconds. Soldiers reported seeing swarms of small, living craft breaking off from the larger ships, latching onto Imperial vessels like parasites and tearing them apart from within. Panic spread across the galaxy. The mighty Empire, which had ruled for centuries with iron pride, was losing battle after battle. Whole sectors burned. Refugees fled in every direction. For the first time, the galaxy realized the Empire could not protect them. The enemy that had nearly erased humanity had returned, and no one had the strength to stop them. In the nebula, the awakened human warships responded. Their lights blazed brighter than before, their ancient systems fully alive now. One by one, they began to move in formation, ignoring the Empire's fleets entirely. They had detected the same signals. They knew their old enemy had come again, and they did not hesitate. The Empire panicked, thinking the warships were preparing to attack them again. Admirals screamed orders to form battle lines, but the hidden humans sent out a message across every channel. They are not preparing to fight you. They are preparing to fight for you. Few believed it, but the truth was made clear when the first Devourer fleet reached the nebula. The alien predators poured in, their ships twisting space as they advanced. Imperial fleets braced for annihilation, but the human warships moved first. Their cannons roared to life, unleashing beams of energy so powerful they carved holes through the Devourer armada. The enemy's living metal twisted and screamed, their ships cracking apart under the force of weapons built for this very war. The Empire's soldiers, stunned, watched the battle unfold. A single human ship tore through more enemies than an entire Imperial fleet had managed. When the second and third warships joined, the battlefield became a storm of fire. The predators that had seemed unstoppable were suddenly prey, hunted and destroyed with merciless precision. For the first time, the Devourers hesitated. But victory was not easy. The war was brutal. For every enemy ship destroyed, more appeared from hyperspace, endless waves pressing into the galaxy. The human warships fought like titans, but even they began to take damage. Their armor glowed with heat, their cannons dimmed from exhaustion, yet still they fought on. They had been built for this purpose, and they would not stop until the enemy was gone. The Empire, desperate and afraid, had no choice but to join them. Ships that had once tried to chain and capture the war machines now fought alongside them, providing cover and support. Soldiers who had cursed the humans now cheered as the ancient vessels tore the Devourers apart. Old enemies stood shoulder to shoulder, bound by the simple truth that survival was all that mattered. The hidden humans revealed themselves fully now, stepping out of the shadows. They boarded Imperial flagships, guiding admirals with knowledge long thought lost. They explained the enemy's tactics, showed weaknesses in their living hulls, and reminded everyone that humanity had faced this war before and won. The Empire, for the first time in its long history, listened to humans not as slaves or subjects, but as leaders. The salvage captain watched from his ship as the greatest battle in living memory unfolded. He saw Imperial and human vessels fighting side by side, their combined firepower carving a path through the invading swarm. He saw the warships move with an intelligence all their own, their voices echoing across every channel, calm and powerful. Target acquired, enemy destroyed, humanity endures. Yet even in victory, fear remained. The Devourers had returned stronger than ever. The galaxy understood now that this was not a single battle but the beginning of a greater war. The Empire's pride had blinded them, their greed had awakened the Guardians too soon, and now the entire galaxy would pay the price. But amid the destruction, hope flickered. The warships had returned, not as relics but as champions. They had reminded the galaxy of what humanity once was and what it could still be. The Empire might still be arrogant, still cruel, but in this moment, even they were forced to admit a simple truth. Without the humans, without their forgotten weapons, the galaxy would already be lost. The salvage captain recorded his final words of the day as he watched the debris of Devourer ships scatter into the nebula. The Guardians have woken. The enemy has returned, and now the galaxy stands on the edge of a war older than any empire. But this time, humanity will not fight alone. The war spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Devourers pushed forward in endless waves, their living ships devouring whole fleets, while the ancient human warships fought with a ferocity that shook the stars. Every battle became a storm of fire and death. Planets burned, space filled with wreckage, and yet the fight raged on. The Empire, once so proud and untouchable, found itself clinging to survival, hiding behind the Guardians it had once tried to chain. The human warships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They fought not with hesitation, but with purpose. Their cannons tore through the Devourer fleets, their shields bent but never broke, and their strategies seemed almost alive, as if they remembered every battle fought thousands of years ago. Imperial officers who once sneered at humanity now spoke the words with awe and fear. Without them, we are nothing. The hidden human enclave stepped into the open fully now. No longer whispers in the shadows, they became leaders of the resistance. They taught the Empire's soldiers how to fight the Devourers, how to recognize their feeding patterns, and where to strike their living hulls. For the first time in centuries, the humans were not the lowest caste of the galaxy. They were the key. Every eye turned toward them, every voice begged for their knowledge, every hand reached for their guidance. The salvage captain who had once discovered the first sleeping warship found himself at the center of it all. He had never been a warrior, never a leader, but now his words carried weight. He stood beside human elders and imperial admirals, helping to plan battles that decided the fate of worlds. Each night he wrote in his log, his handwriting shaking. We are fighting on the edge of history. The warships remember, and through them, humanity rises again. But the battles were brutal. The Devourers unleashed horrors beyond imagination, living swarms that crawled across hulls, devouring metal and flesh alike, cannons that turned gravity against ships, crushing them into nothing, entire fleets lost in minutes, their screams echoing across comms until silence claimed them. For every victory the warships won, the enemy sent twice as many reinforcements. Even the Guardians began to falter. Cracks appeared in their armor, their glowing veins dimmed under the endless strain. One battle near the twin suns of Orath nearly ended in disaster. A Devourer fleet larger than anything seen before broke through the Imperial defenses. The warships stood against them, but even they were overwhelmed. The largest of the human vessels, the same one that had first awakened, was nearly torn apart. Its shields flickered, its weapons dimmed, and for a moment, it looked as though the Guardian would fall. But then, from across the battlefield, the smaller warships moved as one. They positioned themselves around their wounded leader, forming a shield wall, sacrificing their own strength to protect it. Together, they fired in a perfect strike, a beam so powerful it split the enemy flagship in half. The Devourer fleet scattered, retreating into hyperspace. The galaxy cheered, but the cost was heavy. Two of the smaller warships never rose again, their husks drifting silently in the void. The loss cut deep. The humans of the Enclave wept, for to them the ships were not machines but family, guardians who had given everything. Even the Empire fell silent, mourning weapons they had once tried to enslave. For the first time, pride gave way to respect. The admirals bowed their heads and admitted the truth aloud. We owe our lives to them. In the following months, the war shifted. With human knowledge and the Guardians' power, the tide began to turn. Battles that once ended in slaughter now ended in victory. The Empire's fleets, under human guidance, learned to fight smarter, not just harder. They adapted, striking weak points, avoiding traps, and supporting the warships instead of trying to control them. Slowly, painfully, the Devourers began to fall back. The final confrontation came at the edge of the galaxy, where the Devourer's main hive ship emerged. It was colossal, larger than moons, its surface crawling with living creatures and glowing with twisted energy. Entire fleets trembled at the sight of it, but the warships did not hesitate. With a thunderous roar of engines and blazing light, they charged. The Empire's fleets followed, united for the first time in history, humans and aliens fighting side by side. The battle lasted for days. The hive ship unleashed waves of destruction, shattering cruisers, ripping apart defenses, but the Guardians struck harder. Their cannons burned holes through the hive's shell, their shields absorbed the impossible. Their voices echoed across every channel. Humanity endures. Humanity endures. One by one, the warships tore into the hive, driving deep until its core was exposed. With a final blast, brighter than a star, the largest of the warships destroyed it. The explosion lit up the galaxy, the shockwave felt for systems away. The Devourers screamed and then fell silent. The enemy was gone. Silence followed the battle, heavy and unreal. The wreckage of thousands of ships drifted in the void, but in that silence was triumph. The galaxy had survived. The Empire, battered and broken, stood in awe of the humans and their guardians. For the first time, respect replaced arrogance. The Emperor himself spoke, declaring humanity not as subjects, but as saviors. It was a title earned not by words, but by sacrifice. The salvage captain looked out from his ship at the remaining guardians, their hulls glowing faintly as they drifted. He knew they were not finished. They would never truly rest. They were built to wait, to watch, to rise again, if the galaxy ever faced this darkness once more. He whispered into his log, his voice steady this time. The Guardians have won. The Devourers are no more. Humanity has proved it cannot be erased. The Empire called us weak, but today, the galaxy calls us something else, eternal. And so the ancient warships remained, silent in the stars, deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen, protectors of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. The war was over, but the legend of humanity had only just begun.